Once again, Orient is taking it straight to their big brother Seiko with the release of the Orient Mako 3 chronograph watch. Last year, Seiko released their solar-powered quartz chronograph for $700, and this summer, Orient is releasing their own solar-powered quartz chronograph for $300. Is this the ultimate budget alternative to the Seiko Speedtimer? We're going to find that out in this video, and we're also going to be taking a look at some new watch straps sent over by Ritche, who are sponsoring this video. I've been a big fan of Ritche's watch straps for years, and I'm excited to check them out on this watch along with some others in my collection also later in this video. But first, let's take a look at the new Orient Mako 3 chronograph. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave. I live in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. And here in Japan, two of the best watch brands when it comes to value are Seiko and Orient. And if you know anything about the history of these two companies, they're kind of sister companies. They're both under the Seiko Epson umbrella. Both of them are related in a business sense, but they're both completely independently operated. They each have their own history and their own kind of style and design. And recently, it seems like Seiko has been going upmarket a little bit, and Orient has just been continuing to fill the value end of the Japanese watch market. They produce very high quality watches with excellent components at a very competitive price. And even though they're not as well known as Seiko, they produce their own movements, and they have been making watches for more than 60 years. So this is an established brand with a rich history and a reputation for building high-quality watches. Now, one of their most popular watches in recent years is the Mako Dive Watch. And just this summer, Orient released a third edition of the Mako Dive Watch, which now includes a sapphire crystal and some new colorways. But not only did they release a new Mako 3 Dive Watch, they released a completely new Mako 3 chronograph watch. This watch is slightly larger than the Mako Dive watches, coming in at 43 millimeters instead of 42. And rather than Orient's in-house automatic movement, they have a solar quartz movement that is also very high quality and gives you the added convenience of not having to worry about servicing or battery changes. Solar movements are one of the most hassle-free movements around. And I think this is particularly a good move when you're making a chronograph watch, because the alternative of making an automatic chronograph or a mechanical chronograph, the movements in those are going to cost hundreds of dollars just on their own, which usually drives the price of a mechanical or automatic chronograph up to at least $1,000 or more. So to release a chronograph watch at $300 and then also have it be a solar chronograph, that's a pretty good deal. And like I said in the intro, I think that this watch is a great budget alternative to the Seiko Speedtimer watches. It features very similar build quality and components at a much lower price. The key difference between the Orient Mako 3 chronograph and the Seiko Speedtimers is the Orient Mako 3 is built on a dive watch platform, whereas the Speedtimer is really kind of a reinvention of Seiko's racing style chronograph watches. But in some ways, that kind of pushes the specs on the Orient side up above the Seiko ones, because you're getting that sapphire crystal, same as the Seiko, but because it's a dive watch, you're getting twice as high a water resistance at 200 meters, and you're getting much better lume because, again, this is based on a dive watch. On the downside, I think that the Seiko Speedtimers have kind of a more iconic classic look, and they also have a much better bracelet and a little bit better finishing overall than the Orients. But as you're going to see as we jump into looking at this watch in detail, the Orient is looking pretty good as far as its build quality and its finishing goes. But before we jump into the details of this watch, let me show you these new straps from Ritche, because I think they're really cool. We'll see how they look on this watch and a few other ones in my collection. These new tactical straps from Ritche are really cool. They're made from heavy-duty nylon and use something like Velcro to secure the strap to your wrist. And overall, they're very well made and include a lot of really cool details. In order to put the strap on, you simply open it up and loop one end through the very heavy-duty metal buckle, and then pull it to exactly your desired tightness and fasten it with the Velcro. This essentially makes the band infinitely adjustable and allowing you to get a very custom fit to your wrist. Ritche recommends these for people with wrist sizes between 7 and 9 inches. And once on the wrist, they are incredibly comfortable. The strap is a little bit wider than I'm used to, but it still feels great on the wrist. And there's so many cool little accents here, from the vibrant colors that they've chosen to the small strip of reflective material near the watch head, and the embroidered patch or badge that says Fortitude Tactical Band on it. And I was really impressed with the construction of the metal buckle. It's a very solid steel buckle that not only looks great, but also feels pretty much indestructible. At this price, I would have expected a plastic buckle, so it's really cool to see them go the extra mile and put that really heavy-duty one there. These straps are available from Amazon for just over $20. All right, with that out of the way, let's take a closer look at the design of this watch and see how that dive watch heritage translates into this new chronograph watch. This is a dive watch with a chronograph complication. It features all of the hallmarks of a dive watch. You're still getting the unidirectional rotating dive time bezel, 200 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown, very bright loomed hands and markers that are easy to read. But because a chronograph complication has been added, the dial is much busier with 3 additional subdials, and chronograph pushers have been added to the side of the case, changing the silhouette up quite a bit. To be more specific, this is an Orient Mako 3 with a chronograph added to it. And as such, it features the same style hands and markers that the Mako 3 does, along with a color scheme that matches the Mako 3 pretty well. The case size has been enlarged just a little bit. It's now 43 millimeters across and then 47 millimeters lug to lug. But when you have the Mako dive watch next to the chronograph, it's really hard to tell the difference. And this is partly due to the fact that they basically have an identical bracelet with both of them having 22 millimeter lug openings. So if you are a fan of Orient's Mako dive watches, but also like chronographs, this is going to be a home run for you. And for those of you who are just looking for a high quality Japanese made chronograph watch, this is still a great option. It is going to be a little bit on the larger side, and because this is based on a dive watch, it does give you a little bit different feel than you would get from something like a racing chronograph, but you can change the character of this up a bit by swapping it around to different straps. I think if you put this on a leather rally strap, you're definitely going to feel more like a racing chronograph and get the added ruggedness and durability of a dive watch. One thing that I do really appreciate about the design on this watch is the way that they've integrated the subdials into it. The subdials are a step lower into the dial, and this is because they are actually the solar cells for the solar quartz movement, so that's how it's going to recharge itself. But if you didn't already know that, you might not even notice it. There's a very nice beveled edge around them, and they're also outlined in silver, which just makes for a very natural transition down into that subdial section. And the chronograph subdials feature crisp, very legible printing, so good job there. And overall, I really like the use of color here. The chronograph functions are denoted in red, so the central seconds hand is red, and that's going to give you your elapsed seconds. And then the minute counter at 6 o'clock also has a red hand there, so you can quickly tell where your elapsed minutes are. At 9 o'clock, you're going to have a running seconds hand, which is going to tell you the seconds tied to the time. And then over at 3 o'clock, you have a 24-hour subdial also tied to the main time, which in my opinion is basically cosmetic. I don't see any functional value to that. I see it used on a lot of chronographs just to kind of give you a third subdial, but I would much rather see that third subdial used as a totalizer for the chronograph so that you could time things longer than 1 hour or maybe track like up to 12 hours on there. But this is exactly the same layout as the Seiko Speedtimer uses, so I imagine that this movement is very similar to the one that Seiko uses in their watches. Finally, Orient has crammed a date down at the 4:30 position, which isn't the most elegant, especially because it's not color matched, so that white background on the date is going to make it stand out a bit. I think a color matched blue date would have been much better aesthetically. Still, I would much prefer to have some date function on there than to have a no date version because I just love dates on watches. One thing that does seem to be a huge improvement over previous Makos or Komatsu watches is the crown. This one is only slightly larger. I think it's a little bit longer than the other ones, but the knurling is much more easy to get your fingers on, and so it's much easier to use, which is kind of wasted on a solar quartz watch because you're pretty much never going to be using that crown once you set the time initially, except to change the date once a month. And even though the crown has only been slightly increased, it's much better and much easier to use, so that's a really welcome change there. Finally, finishing is surprisingly good. On the chronograph version, Orient is giving you brushing on the sides and tops of the lugs, and then high polished beveled edges on the lugs, whereas on the dive watch versions, you're getting fully polished sides. I think this looks better, and those beveled edges are done really well. So I think this finishing is really good for the price point. So I think from a design standpoint, Orient did a great job here. They've simply taken their very popular Mako dive watch design and added a chronograph to it, but they've implemented that chronograph very cleanly. and it looks and functions great. If you guys like this video so far, make sure you hit the like button down below. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. I try to cover affordable watches, typically in the $500 or less category, and often focus on watches that are available or newly released here in Japan because that's where I live. But I do cover watches from micro brands and other places as well. Anyways, one other thing that I love about watches is the lume. So let's take a closer look at the lume on this watch because Orient is known for putting out some excellent lume, and this watch is no exception. Another thing that's kind of cool about this being based on a dive watch is that it also has really good lume, like much better than Seiko put on their recent Speedtimer releases. The bold dive style hands along with the thick applied markers allow for a lot of lume to be placed on this watch. And I know Seiko always has a good reputation for doing excellent lume, but Orient tends to outdo them. And the score of 11 on my J-Score testing system puts this one at just a step above Seiko's entry-level dive watches. So you'll definitely be able to read the time after dark, not so much using the chronograph features. The second hand is lumed, but if you can only see the second hand and not the minute counter, you can't really tell that much. But I don't know, I guess if you wanted to time something that was going to take less than 60 seconds in the dark, you could do that. But overall, great lume performance. Another thing that I think is really cool about this watch is that it looks great on a wide variety of different strap options. So let me show you a couple of my favorites. Now, one thing that hasn't been improved on this watch is the bracelet. It's still just barely acceptable. The end links are hollow, the clasp is pretty cheap and pressed, and it's kind of rattly, but at least it doesn't pull any hairs on your wrist, and it looks okay once it's on there. And in fact, I think this bracelet actually looks a little bit better because the case is larger here than it is on the Komatsu and the Meiko, and the bracelet is, again, it's the same bracelet. So I think the proportions work a little bit better on this watch than on the dive watches. Still, I think a lot of people are going to want to swap this over to a strap or a different bracelet. And I'm not sure what your bracelet options are going to be. I did try and put my Komatsu bracelet onto this watch, and the end links are just slightly different, even though the rest of the bracelet is the same. And because of that, I wasn't able to make the Komatsu end links fit. But those are hollow end links, which have the little tab on the other side. If you have solid end links on an aftermarket bracelet, it might slide into position, but I don't have anything to test, so I'm not sure about that. But other than bracelet options, because this is a chronograph, I feel like that opens up a lot of interesting strap options. Earlier I showed it on this rally strap, and I think it's a really cool option there to kind of give it more of a racing feel. And if you want to go with a more rugged utilitarian look, those new straps from Ritche also look pretty cool on this. But if you want to go premium, I think Artem's new navy blue loopless sailcloth strap really looks awesome on this watch, but that will set you back some. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the review for today. Thank you for watching. If you want to pick up a t-shirt like this one, you can do so on my website at justthewatch.com. And as always, I would love to hear your comments down below. Let me know what you think of this watch, particularly in comparison to Seiko's watches and this whole kind of battle between Orient and Seiko. I think in general, I tend to favor Seiko's designs over Orient's designs, but I think that Orient does a much better job at the value end of things, and their build quality for the price, I think, is at a higher level than Seiko. So I always have a hard time choosing between the two. But let me know what you think down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.